Hello, friend. I'm so glad you're here. Wherever you are right now, whether you're tucked under a warm blanket, lying in the dark with your eyes already heavy, or just settling in after a long and ordinary day, I want you to know that this space is yours. There's nothing you need to do right now. Nowhere you need to be. The world outside can wait. The thoughts that have been chasing you all day can rest. You can just breathe and listen, and let this story carry you gently wherever sleep wants to take you. Tonight, I want to tell you something true. Something that happened to me, slowly, over the course of many years. It's not a dramatic story. There are no sharp turns or sudden revelations. It's more like a river than a waterfall, wide and quiet, and moving so steadily you almost forget it's moving at all. But rivers get somewhere. Eventually they always do. So let me begin. My name is Clara. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knows which house belongs to which family, where the church on the corner has stood for 112 years, and where the seasons announce themselves loudly. Winter's hard and pale, summer's green and heavy with heat, and the autumn's so beautiful it almost hurts to look at the trees. I was 31 years old when this story really begins, though in many ways it started much earlier than that. I was living in the same town I grew up in, which surprised some people and didn't surprise others. I worked at the public library, which suited me perfectly. I liked the quiet. I liked the way a library smells, that particular combination of old paper and wood, and something slightly dusty, like time itself had settled onto the shelves and made itself comfortable. I liked knowing where everything was. I liked helping people find the thing they were looking for. My apartment was on the second floor of a narrow building, just 2 blocks from the library. It had 3 rooms, a bedroom, a small living area, and a kitchen just wide enough for one person to move around in comfortably. The windows looked out over a maple tree that was so old and so wide it felt like a permanent part of the landscape, like the tree had been there before the road was paved, before the building was built, before anything around it was named. In the fall, that tree turned the most astonishing shade of orange. I would sit at my kitchen table with my coffee and just look at it. And for a few weeks every year, I felt like the luckiest person in the world simply because of that tree. I had a routine. The way people who live alone tend to develop routines. I woke early. I made coffee. I walked to work. I spent my days surrounded by books and the quiet, pleasant hum of other people living their interior lives. I came home in the early evening, made simple dinners, read, and slept. It was a good life. I want to be clear about that. It was a genuinely good life. But there was one part of it that I carried carefully, the way you carry something fragile in your hands, something that had been quietly shaping everything for years, without me fully realizing it. That thing was a man named Daniel. I had known Daniel since we were both children. We grew up on the same street, just 4 houses apart. And when we were young, we played together the way neighborhood children do, building things in backyards, chasing each other through sprinklers, inventing games with complicated rules that we promptly forgot by the next day. We were friends the way childhood makes you friends, which is easy and natural. It doesn't require much thought at all. When we got older, things changed between us the way they sometimes do. Not dramatically. Just a slow, quiet shift. We were in high school together, and I became aware of him differently, not as the boy from down the street, but as a person with a particular way of laughing, a particular way of being serious, a particular way of listening that made you feel like what you were saying mattered. He was kind in a way that wasn't performed. He didn't make a show of being a good person. He just was one, in the small and ordinary ways that actually count. I fell in love with him the way you fall asleep, slowly at first, and then all at once. I remember the exact afternoon I understood it, though I didn't have the word for it then. We were 16. It was late summer, one of those Ohio afternoons where the heat sits on everything like a blanket and the air smells of cut grass and something sweet and faintly overripe, the way summer smells when it's just beginning to turn toward fall. We were sitting on the back steps of his house, sharing a bag of potato chips, not talking about anything important. He was telling me about a book he'd read, something about a man who walked across a country alone, and he was talking about it the way he talked about things that moved him, carefully and without rushing, like the words mattered, and he wanted to get them right. I wasn't even listening to all of it. I was watching his hands move as he talked, watching the way he tilted his head slightly when he was searching for the right word, and I felt something settle in my chest that hadn't been there a moment before. Something warm and quiet and slightly frightening, like a door opening in a room I hadn't known existed. I looked away at the yard and pretended I was just watching a bird on the fence. I didn't tell him. I was 17, and I was shy, and I convinced myself that the right moment would come. But the right moment didn't come in high school. There was the night of the winter formal, when we went as friends because neither of us had other plans, and we danced once to a slow song and I could feel the warmth of his hand on my back, and I thought, now, tell him now. But I didn't. It was the last week of senior year, when everything felt charged with the particular electricity of endings, and he hugged me in the parking lot after graduation and said I was one of his favorite people, and I thought, now. But I didn't. Then we graduated, and he left for college in another state, and I stayed closer to home, and the distance made telling him feel impossible. We kept in touch the way old friends do. Letters at first, real ones on paper, which feels almost quaint to remember now, but it was the 90s and that was still how people communicated, when they wanted to say something that mattered. Then emails, then texts when texting became the way people communicated. We talked occasionally, easily, like no time had passed, and every time I heard from him, I felt that same soft weight settle in my chest, that warmth that didn't quite have anywhere to go. He had girlfriends over the years. I knew about them, not in detail, but in the broad strokes that you learn when you stay in touch with someone. He mentioned one once in a letter, a girl named Rachel who studied biology and liked hiking, and I remember reading that letter at my kitchen table, with a cup of tea and sitting with it for a moment. Not dramatically, not with tears or anger, just sitting with the quiet fact of it, the way you sit with weather you didn't expect. Then I folded the letter and put it away and washed my cup and went to work. I had 1 or 2 relationships myself, serious enough to last a couple of years, gentle enough to end without bitterness. There was a man named Paul, who was thoughtful and patient and genuinely good to me. We were together for almost 3 years. He wanted to get married, eventually, and I think I knew before he asked that my answer would be something complicated and sad. When we ended kindly, and I think we were both a little relieved beneath the grief, which is its own kind of honesty. None of them felt quite like what I was looking for, though I couldn't have told you then what exactly I was looking for. Or maybe I could have, and I just wasn't willing to say it plainly. He came back to our town when he was 29. His mother had gotten sick, not critically, but enough that he wanted to be closer. She had a heart condition that the doctors wanted to watch carefully, and Daniel was the kind of son who took that seriously. He had built a small career as a freelance graphic designer, the kind of work you can do from anywhere, so he rented a house on the edge of town and settled in. And just like that, after more than 10 years of living in different places, we were in the same small town again. I heard about it from my mother before I heard it from him. She mentioned it the way you mention weather, casually, as a piece of town news. Daniel Harmon is moving back, she said. His mother's health. I was standing at her kitchen counter slicing an apple, and my hand slowed slightly on the knife, and I said, "Oh, that's good of him," in a completely normal voice. And I meant it. It was good of him. That was one of the things I had always known about him. I remember the first time I saw him after all those years with complete clarity. It was October. The maple tree outside my apartment was at its peak. That deep, burning orange that always stopped me in my tracks. I had walked to the farmer's market on a Saturday morning, the way I did most Saturdays in the fall. The air was crisp in the way. October air in Ohio is crisp, not cold enough to be uncomfortable, but sharp enough to make you feel awake, present, alive to the moment. The market was set up along the main square, vendors with their tables of apples and squash, and bundles of dried herbs and jars of honey. That caught the light like something precious. I was standing at a table looking at a particular jar of apple butter when I heard someone say my name. I turned around, and there was Daniel. He looked the same and different all at once, the way people do when you haven't seen them in a long time. He was taller than I remembered, or maybe I had just forgotten how tall he was. His hair was shorter. There were a few years of life around his eyes. Not in a tired way, but in the way that makes a person look more fully themselves. He was smiling, and his smile was exactly the same as it had always been, and something in me went very still. We talked for a long time, right there in the middle of the market, with people moving around, US and the smell of cider donuts, drifting over from a nearby stall. He told me about his mother, who was doing better. He told me about his work, about the kind of projects he took on. He asked about the library, and he asked about my life, and he listened to my answers with that particular quality of attention he had always had. Like what I was saying actually mattered. Like he was in no hurry to be anywhere else. After an hour, we both had bags full of vegetables. We had bought mostly as an excuse to keep standing there talking, and eventually we said goodbye and went our separate ways. I walked home slowly. The leaves came down around me in the wind, copper and gold and rust, and I walked through them with my bag of apples and my jar of honey and the quiet, familiar feeling in my chest that I had been carrying for so many years. I had almost stopped noticing it. Almost. Over the following months, we fell back into a friendship easily, the way you slide back into a comfortable chair. We ran into each other around town. We had coffee sometimes, at the small cafe on Elm Street that had been there since before we were born, where the booths were upholstered in dark green vinyl and the coffee came in heavy, ceramic mugs that were always slightly too hot to hold at first. We texted. He came to the library occasionally, and we would talk between the shelves in low voices, the way library conversations require, and there was something I loved about that. The enforced quietness of it, the way it made our conversations feel secret and unhurried. There were small, ordinary moments that I held onto without meaning to. A winter afternoon when the snow was coming down in that slow, heavy way that makes the world go quiet, and he stopped by the library with 2 coffees from the cafe, just because he was passing. He set one on the circulation desk, without making a thing of it, and started browsing the shelves, and I stood there with my warm cup and the snow falling outside the tall windows and thought, This is the thing. There was a Sunday in late spring when we walked through the old cemetery at the edge of town, not morbidly, but because it was peaceful there and old, and the trees were enormous and the stones had interesting names on them from the 1800s. We walked slowly and read the inscriptions aloud to each other, and he laughed at one that said simply, he did his best, and his laugh in the green spring air was one of the best sounds I had heard in a long time. There was the afternoon his car wouldn't start, and I drove him to the hardware store, and then to the auto parts shop, and we spent 2 hours troubleshooting together in his driveway, while the late summer heat lay heavy on everything, and by the time we fixed it, we were both slightly sunburned and laughing about something that doesn't seem important enough to remember now, but the feeling of it, the easy companionship of it, 2 people working on something ordinary together, that stayed with me. I want to be honest with you about something. I was not pining in a desperate or painful way. I want to make sure you understand that. The feeling I carried for Daniel was not an ache or a wound. It was something softer than that. It was more like the feeling of a song you love playing in a room, just below the level of full attention. Always there, always pleasant. coloring the air without demanding anything from you. I had a full life. I had friends, a job I loved, a routine that gave me genuine satisfaction. I was not waiting in suspension, not putting my life on hold for a dream. I was just living. And inside my living there was this one constant, quiet thing. The way I felt about Daniel. He knew I cared about him, I think. We had the kind of friendship where warmth was apparent, where it was clear that we mattered to each other. But the particular nature of my feelings, that deeper layer, I had never spoken aloud to him. Not in high school. Not in the years between. Not after he came back. I had my reasons. Some of them were fears, and some of them were something else. I was afraid that saying it might break what we already had, and what we already had was genuinely beautiful. I was afraid that I had built something in my mind that couldn't survive the light of reality. I was afraid, honestly, of being ordinary, of being someone who loved someone who didn't love her back, which felt like such a common story that I had convinced myself mine was somehow different, somehow more private and therefore more protected. And there was another reason, one that took me much longer to understand. I wasn't sure for a long time that I fully trusted the feeling. I had carried it so long that I sometimes wondered if it was real love or just the idea of love, the comfortable, familiar shape of a feeling I had grown used to having. I needed to be sure before I said anything, because saying it would make it real in a way it couldn't be unsaid. So the years went on. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years after he came back to town, and we were still exactly what we had been, close friends, warm and easy with each other, two people who were genuinely important to each other, but who had never said the particular thing that might change everything. It was in the 4th year after his return, which meant a full decade and a few months after I had first understood what I felt for him, that something shifted. It happened slowly, then all at once. His mother passed away in the spring. She had been sick for a long time, and her death, when it came, was quiet and expected, but that doesn't make those things easier. I knew something about grief. I had lost my own father several years before, and I knew that grief doesn't care how expected or logical it is. It arrives with its full weight regardless. Daniel was quiet in the weeks after his mother died, not withdrawn in a worrying way, but inward-looking, processing. I gave him space when he seemed to need it, and I was present when he seemed to need that. I brought food sometimes, the way people do, casseroles and bread and simple things that said, "I'm here," without requiring any particular response. He thanked me in the way that people thank you when they mean it all the way down, not with elaborate words, but with a look, a squeeze of the hand, a silence that said everything. One evening in June, a few months after the funeral, he called me and asked if I wanted to go for a walk. It was the kind of summer evening that feels designed to be walked in, warm but not heavy, the light coming down gold and slow, the air smelling of cut grass and something blooming nearby, probably the wild clover that grew along the edges of the trail. We walked along the old rail trail that runs through the edge of town, the one they converted from old railroad tracks years ago, where the path is packed gravel and on either side there are trees so tall they form a kind of canopy in summer. We talked the way we had always talked, easily, without effort, but that evening there was also something underneath the ease, something that felt like it was trying to find a way to the surface. We talked about his mother for a while. He told me about the last few weeks, the things she'd said when she knew the time was close. He told me about cleaning out her house, going through her things, finding letters she'd kept from his father who had died years before, love letters that surprised him not with their content, but with their plainness, ordinary notes about ordinary things, mixed in with the tender ones, as if love lived in all of it equally, the grocery lists and the eye, misuse indistinguishable, and how carefully she had kept them. She kept everything, he said quietly. Every card, every note, even little things I drew for her when I was a kid. He paused. I didn't know she kept all of it. We walked in silence for a while after that. The gravel crunched softly under our feet. A firefly blinked in the undergrowth. Then another, the way they do in June, appearing like small private celebrations of the coming dark. At some point, he went quiet in a different way, a deeper way, and I let the silence sit because I had learned over the years that he sometimes needed that space to arrive at whatever he was trying to say. Then he said simply, "Clara, I've been thinking a lot about what actually matters." I didn't say anything. I waited. "My mom used to say that the problem with most people is they wait too long," he continued. "They wait for things to be perfect, or for the timing to be right, or for some sign that it's okay to want what they want." He was looking at the path in front of us, not at me. She said the wanting doesn't wait for permission. It just is. The light was going amber and low around us. Somewhere nearby, a bird was singing. A steady, unhurried song, the same few notes repeated. The gravel crunched softly under our feet. "She said something else too," he said. He stopped walking, and I stopped with him, and then he turned and looked at me. "She said she always thought of all the people in my life. You were the one who actually knew me. My heart was doing something complicated and quiet that I had no name for." "I think she was right," he said. "And I think I've been waiting too, for some reason. For some permission I didn't actually need." He paused. "I've been thinking about you differently for a long time, Clara. Not just as my friend, though you are that. As more than that." He exhaled slowly. "I think I love you. I think I've been trying to tell myself I didn't. Then I'm not sure why. But I'm tired of waiting for some perfect moment that never seems to arrive." The bird sang its small repeating song. I stood very still for a moment. Not because I was shocked, though some part of me was, despite everything, but because I wanted to be present for it. I wanted to feel the full weight of the moment before I said anything. I had imagined this conversation so many times over so many years that I had almost stopped believing it would happen. And now that it was happening, I wanted to be truly in it, not somewhere above it watching from a distance. I looked at him. The evening light on his face was the same warm gold as the trail around us, and he looked tired and open in the way that grief sometimes leaves a person stripped of pretense, returned to something essential. Then I said, "I've been in love with you since I was 17 years old, Daniel." He looked at me for a long moment. The fireflies blinked in the undergrowth. The bird kept singing. Then he made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and something more tender, and he reached out and took my hand. We stood there on the trail in the golden evening light for a long time, not saying much. There wasn't much that needed to be said right then. Sometimes arriving somewhere is enough. Sometimes you just need to stand in the place you've been walking toward and feel the ground under your feet. We walked back slowly when it was nearly dark. The fireflies were everywhere by then, dozens of them, blinking in and out of the trees. We walked with our hands still loosely connected, and I thought about the 17-year-old on those back porch steps in late summer, who had noticed something opening in her chest and looked away at a bird on a fence. I wished I could tell her something. I wasn't sure exactly what. Maybe just, "It's okay. It works out. Keep noticing the birds." I want to tell you what I learned from all of that waiting, because that is really what this story is about. It is not about whether I got the ending I hoped for, though I did, gently and quietly, in the way that the real good things seem to come. It is about the 10 years themselves, about what it means to love someone steadily and quietly over a long period of time, without expectation, without ultimatums, without making the love into a kind of pressure. Because I think there are two kinds of waiting. There is the waiting that shrinks you, the waiting where you stop living your life, because you're holding all of it in suspension, where the love becomes a wound rather than a warm thing, where you lose yourself in the waiting, until there is not much left of you to offer when the moment finally comes. I have seen that kind of waiting. It is real and it is painful, and I do not want to minimize it. But then there is the other kind, The kind one somehow stumbled into, maybe by accident, maybe by temperament, maybe because the library and the maple tree and my little kitchen and my Saturday mornings at the market was so good to me that I never had a reason to abandon them while I waited. The kind where the love is just one part of a life that is genuinely lived, fully inhabited. I did not wait for Daniel by standing still. I waited for him the way a tree waits for spring, by continuing to grow, putting down roots, living through winters, doing the ordinary necessary work of being alive. And I believe this deeply, that the love I had to offer him when the moment finally came was richer for all of that. I wasn't offering him 10 years of longing. I was offering him 10 years of a person who had lived well and loved honestly and kept her heart open even when it would have been easier to close it. That feels like something worth knowing. There are things I want to tell you about the years in between, the ordinary years that made up the long middle of this story, because I think those years are just as important as the beginning and the end. In those years, I learned to make bread. Not fancy bread. Simple, honest loaves that took time and patience, that had to be left alone to rise, that couldn't be rushed. I learned that there is a particular satisfaction in making something with your hands that has nothing to do with how it turns out. The process itself is the thing. The kneading, the waiting, the warmth of the oven. I read hundreds of books. Thousands maybe. I traveled to the books before I traveled anywhere else to places I have never been and might never go. Through characters who were nothing like me and everything like me. Through stories that helped me understand my own. There is a reason I loved working in a library. Books were a kind of company, the best and most patient kind. I made friends who were not romantic, but who were, in their own way, love. My friend June, who had known me since college, who called me every Sunday evening without fail, who made me laugh harder than anyone else, and who told me the truth even when the truth was uncomfortable. My colleague Marcus, who brought fresh pastries on Monday mornings and who had an encyclopedic knowledge of mid-century American fiction and who always stopped what he was doing when you needed to talk. My neighbor Mrs. Park, who was in her 70s and who had a garden full of peonies and who left bundles of them on my doorstep when they bloomed in June, tied with kitchen twine, left there without announcement. These people and the small graces of my daily life, the maple tree, the smell of the library, the weight of a good book in my hands, the particular pleasure of a Saturday, with nothing scheduled, these were not consolation prizes for not having what I wanted. They were the substance of a good life. They were the thing itself. I think about that a lot, even now. How easy it is to think that the life you actually have is just a placeholder for the life you're waiting to begin. How much can be missed in that thinking. How the maple tree doesn't know you're distracted. It just burns its orange every October, whether you notice it or not. I noticed it every year, and I am grateful for that. The year after Daniel and I found our way to each other was quiet in the way that genuinely good things tend to be quiet. There were no grand ceremonies, no sweeping declarations. There was just the ordinary business of two people becoming part of each other's lives, really part of them, in the deep and practical ways that matter. His toothbrush in the bathroom, my books on his shelves, Sunday mornings with coffee and the newspaper spread across the kitchen, table in comfortable silence, the same silence we had always been good at, now with a different name. We talked about the years, not with bitterness or regret, or at least, not much of either, but with the particular tenderness of people who have finally told the truth and are still a little amazed at how the truth felt. He told me he had known, somewhere beneath knowing, for longer than he wanted to admit, that there had been moments, the winter afternoon with the coffee, the Sunday in the cemetery, others, where the feeling had been close to the surface and he had let it sink back down because the timing felt wrong, or because he was afraid of what it would change. I think I was afraid of needing you, he said one evening. I already needed you as my friend. That felt like a lot. I understood that. I had been afraid of similar things, just arranged differently. We didn't rush anything. We were both in our 30s, past the age of hurry, and there was a particular sweetness in taking things slowly, in letting each new ordinary thing become a small quiet joy. The first winter together, watching snow come down from the same window. The first time I met his friends from college, who welcomed me with the warm recognition of people who had already heard about you. The first time I caught him reading a book I had recommended and could tell, from the way he was holding it, close and careful, that he was loving it. His mother's garden became mine to tend. She had left it full of perennials, plants that come back every year, without being asked, that remember their way back to the surface each spring. Peonies and black-eyed Susans and a sprawling rosebush that climbed the back fence in a tangle of pale pink blooms. I had never gardened before, not seriously, but Daniel asked if I'd like to help keep it going, and I said yes, because it felt like the right kind of yes, the kind that leads somewhere good. That first spring in the garden, I learned things about patience I hadn't known. I needed to learn. The perennials came back on their own schedule, not mine. Some of them bloomed earlier than I expected. Others took longer. A few of the plants looked dead all the way through April, nothing but bare sticks and cold earth, and then in May they opened, quietly, without drama, in a color so pure it stopped me mid-task. I thought about my own life, standing there in the dirt with my hands green and muddy. How many times I had looked at something and thought, dead, finished, not coming back, and then it came back. I don't know exactly when I stopped being afraid of the slow things. Maybe gradually, the way the perennials return, without announcement, without fanfare, just the simple fact of being there when the season is right. I want to talk about kindness, because the title of this story mentions it, and I think the kindness in this story is easy to miss if you're not looking for it. The kindness wasn't a single grand gesture. It wasn't one shining moment of generosity that changed everything. It was accumulated, ordinary kindness. The kind that doesn't draw attention to itself. It was Daniel bringing his mother soup every week for years, quietly, without making her feel like a burden. It was June calling every Sunday without fail, even when she was tired, even when there was nothing particular to say, because she knew that the call itself was the point. It was Mrs. Park and her peonies left on the doorstep, tied with kitchen twine. It was Marcus and his Monday pastries. And it was me, I think, staying open, keeping my heart in a state of willingness, not hardening it with bitterness when the years went on and nothing changed. That is a kind of kindness too, I think. Kindness to yourself. The decision to keep living well and loving what is lovable, and not closing off the parts of you that are capable of feeling things. That decision costs something. It does. It would be easier, in some ways, to close down. To say, I have waited long enough, and since this particular thing didn't come, I will stop wanting it. To build walls that protect you from caring too much about anything. I understand the impulse. I felt it sometimes on the hard days, in the cold seasons when the perennials were just bare sticks and it was difficult to believe they would come back. But I chose, again and again, to stay open. I am not presenting this as virtue. It was also partly temperament, partly luck, partly the maple tree and the library and June, and all the other things that made my life full enough that I never ran out of reasons to keep going. Not everyone has those things, and I know that, and I want to be careful about making my story into a lesson. It is just my story. It is just what happened to me. But for whatever it's worth, I'm glad I stayed open. I'm glad I let the years be the years they were, rather than holding them in contempt for not being something else. It is late now, wherever you are. I can feel it, that particular quality of the night, when it has settled fully around everything, when the last noises have gone quiet, and the dark is soft and complete. The kind of dark that doesn't press on you but holds you, the way good blankets hold you. Present, warm, without demand. I want to leave you with an image, something to carry into sleep. There is a morning in early autumn, October again, always October, when I wake up before the alarm. The light is just beginning, that thin grey blue that comes before the real light, and the apartment is cool and still. I can hear the first few birds starting up outside, tentative, exploring the silence. I lie in bed for a few minutes without moving, listening, feeling the weight of the blankets. Somewhere in the house, something settles, the small sounds of wood and quiet that a house makes when it's at rest. I breathe slowly. My body is warm and my mind is soft, not thinking of anything particular, just present in the morning the way you can only be, when you haven't quite decided to be awake yet. Then I get up and go to the kitchen and start the coffee. The familiar sounds, the water, the grinder, the slow drip, the smell that fills the small room. Dark and warm and grounding, the smell of every morning I have lived in this kitchen. Years of mornings, all of them layered into this one. I stand at the window while I wait, and outside I can see the maple tree, still mostly green, but with the first few leaves turning at the edges, the first hints of the orange that's coming, the annual extravagance that I have watched every year from this window. Daniel comes in after a while, still half asleep, his hair unbothered, reaching past me for a mug. He smells of sleep and warmth. We stand at the window together for a moment, both of us holding our coffee, both of us looking at the maple tree, neither of us saying anything. We don't need to. The tree burns at its edges. The morning is still and pale and generous. This is enough. This has always been enough. There is so much ordinary beauty in a single morning. The specific quiet of it, the smell of coffee, the birds, the tree beginning its slow, gorgeous change, the feeling of a day that hasn't started yet, full of unhurried possibility, the presence of a person you love, simply there, simply warm, not asking anything of the morning except to be in it. This is what I want you to feel right now. This particular stillness, the sense that the day's weight has lifted, that there is nothing required of you in this moment, that you are exactly where you're supposed to be. Whatever you have been carrying, whatever longing, whatever patience, whatever love that hasn't yet found its way home, you can set it down for now. It will be there in the morning if you need it. But right now, you don't need it. Right now there is just the dark, and the quiet, and the slow, easy drift of your breathing. You have waited for things. Maybe you are waiting for something right now. Maybe it is a person, or a season of life, or a version of yourself that you haven't quite become yet. Whatever it is, I want you to know something that I have come to believe all the way through. The waiting, when you live it well, is not wasted time. It is not the space between the real things. It is one of the real things. It is the garden in winter, looking bare and finished, already quietly planning its return. The perennials come back. They always come back. Rest now, friend. The night is soft and long and kind, and there is nowhere you need to go. Let your thoughts slow down, like a river finding its wide, calm stretch. Let your breath be easy. Let the dark be gentle. You have been patient. You have been good. You have kept your heart open even when it cost you something. That is enough. That has always been enough. Sleep now. Sleep well. I'll be here when you need another story. But for tonight, you've found your way home. Good night.